Welcome to My Shifters Radio. Today is Friday, April the 10th, 2026. Welcome, Miss Susan. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart. And welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. Miss Susan, how are you, young lady? Enjoyed that conversation yesterday.
Yeah, and I got another question for you. I'm fine, thanks. I'll save it until you're ready.
Let's go for it. We're here. Let's go for it.
I've been trying to think of what the equivalent opposite would be from perception conversation. No, perception communication. Communicating out of my perception, which assumes that I'm communicating in error. It might be a beautiful error. But anyway,
Yes.
What would be the opposite of perception communication? Would be actuality communication?
My take would be that once we, that the Course in Miracles where it talks about forgiveness, let go all the things you think you want, your trifling treasure, your gold put away, and leave a clean and open space within your mind for Christ to come. In that context, in the context of your question, in the context of that quote, my take would be Christ coming would be information directly from actuality becoming available in this on the screen of perception in the 9-bit mind. So does our perception come from carbon-based memory, which means it's always the past, and no matter how wonderful or even how accurate it is about what's happening in the actuality, the truth is if it's coming from carbon-based memory, it's all from the past. So it can't really be true. And a lot of people are trying to get back to, let me get lots of good stuff from carbon-based memory. But even then, that's the passage where Yeshua says, let the dead bury the dead and the blind lead the blind. If we're living in wonderful perceptual constructs from the past, we're still dead. There's still no life in it. But breathing, letting loose, connecting in the Holy of Holies to the direct source, the uplink, now actuality is able to write in that 9-bit space. And so we can get accurate, true information from the actuality. Mm-hmm. And accompanying that, in my experience, we get information directly from the actuality in ways that what we call the mind can't even comprehend, can't even really talk about.
Right.
Where you get this, what the intuitive sense, that's where you get the imagination functioning, that it's a whole different realm, it's a whole different game that John the Baptist is trying to copy, that carbon-based memory is trying to copy, and everything in carbon-based memories is a cheap copy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying in my own mind to find a bridged set of words between responsibility communication versus perception communication. Perception communication, I have a feeling for. Responsibility communication, I have a feeling for because of all the talking back and forth and explaining. But if I'm anything like the lay people out in the world, they might have to fight their way to that understanding that you gave us yesterday. And I'm wondering if there's a quicker route, another word. Of course, you've been using that word for years. You might not want to give it up. You might not need to give it up. It might be my brain cells that are sluggish. So I've just been thinking about that.
Well, of course, everybody wants it instant. Everybody wants it yesterday. And there's no instant pathway to it. Perception, if we've lived our lives in the world of perception, constructs out of carbon-based memory, which is a reflection of generations and generations and generations and generations of communication data, or data that's been locked into tissue that is bringing forward what it is that we want to communicate about. That doesn't change overnight. You don't get rid of that overnight. You might be able to collapse a particular piece of it using the forgiveness process, drop in and process through the amplified energy that keeps that particular issue moving. And when that amplified energy is weakened, then instead of this big perceptual construct of rage and pain and trauma coming up and taking the place of what actually happened in interaction with somebody, that whole process weakens. And I can remember it, but it isn't something that comes up with such impetus that it takes me over and has me playing the blame game with somebody.
I don't think we've communicated. I didn't get across what I meant. I understand that. I do understand. I think I understand what you've been teaching and applying it with great results over the years. It's just the word responsibility communication to use that as the word that explains what you just said. And wondering if, like, actuality communication for me would come closer to it, because actuality is the opposite of perception.
Yeah, that would not be my take at all. Again, responsibility communication. I'm going to use words that reflect that I'm aware that what I'm talking about is something that's mine, that's happening inside me. I am taking responsibility for it. Projection communication, I use words that indicate that I believe that what I'm experiencing inside of me is caused by you. So making the leap from projection communication to responsibility communication is monumental. Now, if I've gotten to the place where I'm living in actuality, then I'm still going to utilize responsibility communication. I'm still going to use words. I'm still going to use words that reflect that this is my reality. This is what's going on for me. And I've got a whole different experience than now. I've got a live experience, a live and an enlivening experience. When I live in actuality. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with that. So I don't. Anyway, maybe I should just drop it and listen, because it's probably all going to come out.
No, go for it. I think we got some good clarification yesterday. Let's go for the next level.
Jeannie, do you know what I'm trying to say? Is maybe Jeannie's brain cells can bridge, because she's been connected with you for a longer time.
I look at the word responsibility as being able to respond instead of reacting. So if we're communicating from being, then we're able to respond from actuality. Whereas if we're just reacting, then we're doing whatever we did in the past.
That would put it for me, Jeannie, in a different category than responsibility communication. Yes, breaking down the word responsibility is moving into this is a response, not a reaction. But that, to me, is in a different category than responsibility communication, where, once again, I'm using words that I own, that this construct that I'm communicating about belongs to me and is mine. So I think that's two different, my take would be that's two different uses of the word.
And Jeannie, you said respond. It was as if response and respond were conflated in what you said, and I loved it, but that wasn't respondability communication. It's as if you were saying, I have the ability to respond, but not react. And if I'm responding to an actuality, I'm not projecting, I'm actually perceiving actuality.
I think that's possible.
You think that's possible? I should hope it's possible.
And
anyway,
so
I think
what category, Michael, would, like, if you're just having a conversation with someone, you're communicating, there's, it's just about, what's going on, or how are you and that kind of stuff. There's an not the, I can't say it positively, without any kind of projection or anything. You're just communicating.
Not sure where you're going with that.
What would you call that? I mean, it doesn't really have a title. It's just communication. It's not projection communication or responsibility communication, because there's nothing to take responsibility for. It's just you're talking.
You could be talking out of lots of preconceptions and carbon-based memory garbage and all sorts of things, though, and appear to be communicating. I don't know if you could tell whether a sort of general, everyday, small talk encounter on the sidewalk could be called either one or
Right.
the other right away.
Right.
Anyway,
Responsibility communication is always calling me back to letting go of the pretense
yeah.
that something outside of me is the cause of this, and stepping into the place where I recognize this is mine. Now, once I recognize that, I can now be in a reaction. And this would be the other category for me that Jean's talking about. We have reactive communication. You trigger an old reality in me, and I dance and scream and shout and do whatever I do out of my reaction, out of what's replaying in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can recognize, oh, this has just triggered some old fear and rage in me. I'm going to breathe, soften, let go of that, and consciously respond. I'm going to come from a place where, well, I've got this old reaction going on. I recognize it, but I'm not going to allow that to control my expression. I'm going to enter rather into conscious responsibility communication. But we're back to, the no, I don't want to be responsible for this. This really did happen out there. This is an actuality. Yes, all the things we experience come out of, there's an actuality that triggered into activity.
Mm-hmm.
But when I try to make the actuality responsible for what my reaction is, that's when I get into trouble. And that's what the objective is with the responsibility communication tool, is to change that. And it's something that, over the years, I've asked, I can't tell you, countless number of people in the communication workshop. So how many have ever were brought up in a home where when mom turned to dad and there was an issue going on, said, gee, dad, when you said thus and so, that brought a lot of rage up in me. And what I'd like to do is be responsible for my rage and heal it. Do you have any thoughts or any ideas on how you can support me? And in all the years I've asked that question, I've had one person who said, yeah, I was brought up in a household like that.
Yeah, I can believe
Otherwise, I've never met a person. There's nobody that's ever seen it. I mean, this whole idea of responsibility communication, from the point where I started to get an inkling that there's a different way to communicate, to where I developed those tools, was a period of years.
Mm-hmm.
I had never seen it. I'd never watched anybody who actually stood up like an actual adult, and from the first breath in a situation, knew that what they were dealing with was their own. And the desire to remain willfully ignorant of the cause of my own perceptual constructs is one of the most common attributes of the non-being mind that there is. And it's one that's run virtually all of us, pretty much everybody.
So, Michael, I understand that, and I've learned what you mean, and I get it. Would you say that responsibility communication is akin to nonviolent communication, from that other author that wrote about the author of
I'm not familiar with the steps in nonviolent communication, but just by the name of it, I'd say no.
No, okay.
I don't know. I presume, because I know that's a very popular thing out there, is nonviolent communication. But the minute you tell me you're going to do something nonviolently, I know what's at the root of your perceptual mind,
Oh
and
yeah,
I know that you're not in the realm of actual responsibility.
because it's put in the negative.
Yeah, I mean, it's speaking again, as we were talking about yesterday with regulatory speech. To
Yeah.
me, when somebody says, "Oh, I have a system of nonviolent communication to use with you," that might be light years ahead of what the culture is doing with its vicious,
Mm-hmm.
projection communication. But when you
Mm-hmm.
tell me it's nonviolent, what you just told me is I'm coming from my unconscious, unresolved violence here with this. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Like that.
efforting moving forward, but the fact that you called it nonviolent, the fact that your automatic decision system has kicked up the word nonviolent
Mm-hmm.
says to me that there's still violence involved.
So
And the
is
effort, of
there?
course, is to move away. It's kind of like unconditional love. The whole world for years was in this. When people were moving away from the insanity of the culture, I mean, millions of people. Oh, unconditional love, unconditional love. Well, what you just told me is now you're doing your love with conditions. Now you're
Mm-hmm.
putting conditions on the presence of your being in your own physiology, and the shift that needs to take place to bring yourself into alignment energetically is to move into all embracing love, all encompassing love. Whatever goes on, I am going to keep my human life. I'm going to breathe and keep my human life present for whoever, for whatever, for the lowest of the low, the dirtiest of the dirtiest, the ugliest of the ugly, and the most beautiful of the beautiful. I'm going to stand steady in the center of my being as love, and therefore
That's
I am able to encompass or embrace whatever happens. And to me, that's the greatest gift that we can give ourselves. That is our own physiology, our own ego states. And that's the greatest gift that we can give the world. Somebody's in trouble. Somebody just went through a horrible, terrible, one of the nastiest experiences you can imagine. And if I show up in my reaction to terrible, ugly, nasty, vicious, hurt, hold breath, I'm not of any use. I'm not of any support in that situation.
mm-hmm.
I'm joining them. I'm reinforcing energetically. When you think of it from an energetic point of view, I'm reinforcing the energy of the trauma that they just went through. Just by the fact that I hold trauma and I'm joining with their trauma, I strengthen it for both of us. But when I forgive as to the trauma that comes up in me, when I take a breath and I let go of that trauma and I step back into my own physiology as the conscious, active presence of love, not something I do, but what I am, and I bring who and what I am to this circumstance, I just made a contribution.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Um, so in a way, it's like one person's doing responsible communicating and one person is doing irresponsible. The irresponsible is the perception communication, and the responsible is the actuality communication.
Sounds like you're getting complicated.
It How long have you've been years using that term responsibility communication?
Yes.
So there's every reason why you wouldn't want to part with that phrase.
Well, I guess the point would be, why would I reinvent a wheel that's working really well?
If it's working really well, absolutely. But you had Terry on the phone the other day saying, I don't understand this. And you had me pushing and finally getting it. So it's working really, really well for you and maybe for most other people. The reason I'm pushing so hard is I'm very, very attached, probably overly attached in like with Jeannie's book. What she had to say was so important. Her experience and the tools she used that you provided, that I wanted to make sure it was presented in a clear way. And I'm sure there are places in there where maybe it could have been better, but we really worked well as a team. And I feel that same sort of possessive, this is partly my thing now, and I want to make sure the words are easily accessible the way the word
So,
perception and actuality are so clear.
so, so my offering is that responsibility versus projection communication gives the whole package in a context which you can understand it. Responsibility communication, irresponsibility communication now just muddies the waters and makes a mess of it for me.
Okay, then how about
Because I can say
responsible
I can do all.
communication versus perception? How about just responsible communication?
How about responsibility communication and projection communication? Real clear, real simple. Bingo. Anybody who hangs around long enough to build the brain cells is going to get it. For me, when I introduce, like, if you interjected the word responsible and irresponsible. Well, yes, the person who's in projection is doing irresponsible communication, but that only tells a very small piece of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Projection communication gives the whole story. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm taking
big.
something inside of me and I'm putting it outside of me. Now I've got a complete package, but responsible and irresponsible. For me, the word just doesn't even come close to communicating what the distinction between responsibility communication and projection communication.
I'll rest my case.
I don't know what that means. Would you communicate more with me on that?
I'm backing off from fighting with you anymore on this, Michael.
Oh, I didn't know we were fighting. Okay.
Well, I'm pushing, and I realize I keep pushing, and
No, that's okay. I'm happy with pushing. You know, pushing oftentimes leads to clarity. And for me right now, the clarity is that if I try to make the corresponding words responsible and irresponsible, I miss the whole piece of the
I
puzzle.
understand
that.
I totally understand that, and I back
Okay.
off from that. I'm not going to try to push that part.
Okay.
The equivalent of perception communication, the equivalent healthy opposite does not sound like responsibility communication. It just sounds like maybe actuality communication or responsible communication rather than responsibility communication. They're two different types of words. I'm talking about just the language. So I'm pushing again, and I said I wasn't going to.
So responsibility communication to me is pretty clear language that I'm actually going to take responsibility for the perception of my mind. They're the brain cells you want to build, and that's what that is meant to offer to somebody.
Great. If you said that every time, that would work. If you said that instead of just saying responsibility communication, you just translated it into something that's perfectly clear. But it took a whole sentence to do it. I've been
But every
looking.
time I want to refer to it, I'm not going to use a whole sentence for the title of my workshop.
I should hope not.
My workshop's going to get lost.
Right. I should hope not. So I'm looking for a word that could do it rather than responsibility communication. I would like to throw this open to the general public in the radio show, because if I'm the only one yelling about this for 2 or 3 radio shows, I'm ready to put down my arguments and let things happen as they need to.
Yeah. Tell me, if you would, what's your objection to the word responsibility? I mean, it communicates. Well, then what are we talking about?
Well, I've never heard somebody, I wish I could find an equivalent. Responsibility is a noun, and responsible is an adjective. Or responsible, it's a type of communication. What type of communication are we talking about? We're talking about responsible communication or communication that comes from perception, which means there's an error in it. And of course, those are many words, not just one word. I'm looking for an adjective to communication that's completely explains it. Responsibility is a
That's
noun.
the word.
What?
That's the word, responsibility. Let's use it as an adjective. It describes a type of communication. It's responsibility communication. And as an adjective, what it means is the type of communication that it is, and it is not a noun, it is an adjective. It's a type of communication where I use words that reflect my awareness that this construct in my mind belongs to me and I want to speak about it and reflect my ownership of it. So responsibility would be an adjective there that
Yeah.
the
It
word
isn't an
responsible
adjective.
doesn't go
You've
to.
invented an adjective to fit with, invented it. The adjective would be responsible communication.
Well, if I've invented it, that's good because I've never seen anybody in the world ever do it until these tools came along. So yes, we need a new word because it doesn't exist. My take is what I hear now. Oh, but I want something from the old world and the old words that will tell me about this. This hasn't existed in the world before, as I see it. And all the looking around, all the work I've done, and all the circles I've done it, this form of communication exists nowhere in the world that I've ever seen it. So yes, it is going to take a new adjective in order to describe it because it is something new that, as far as I know, has never appeared anywhere before. So I'm happy with a new word, a new. If we need to turn responsibility into an adjective, I mean, it describes a type of communication, and it is a new word because there isn't a word for it because it doesn't exist anywhere else, at least that I'm aware of. I've never seen it. I've never seen anybody even come close to it. I mean, everywhere we look, I mean, just turn on the television, flip for an hour on 20 different channels over a period of an hour, and you'll hear at least 25 different conversations about projection communication. Well, look what they did this, and then they did that, and he did this, and he did, and I'm upset because, and look how they hurt me, and that's the whole process of the world, and it's time for us to give it up. It's time for us to give up the resistance to owning our perceptual constructs. It's time for us to give up.
I totally agree with all that. I totally agree with all that. Okay, I don't argue with the concept, Michael. I think that's the genius of it. I just want a word like dependable or reliable or trustworthy or accountable, something that's a real adjective, not
Why
a
don't you like
noun
my
like
word?
responsibility that has to be
No,
explained into being an
responsibility is an adjective.
You made it into one, but in the English
It is an
language.
adjective. It is something new to represent something that's new in the world. In order to, if you've got 100 trillion billion words,
Here?
if you've got
Here?
if you have 100 trillion billion words in the world, but not a word for this particular thing, you're going to have to come up with a new word. And so if we need a new word to describe this type of communication, I'm going to say the word that does it adequately is responsibility. Because, you know, that word accurately describes what the process is about. And I mean, if you come up with another one that's more functional, I'm willing to hear it. But in the words you used, none of them start to encapsulate what the word responsibility does as an adjective about a particular quality of communication. I haven't heard one that comes close. Now, as you said, let's turn to our listeners, see if anybody else has got some input, got a thought around that. Anybody else have some input around this idea of responsibility communication?
We only have Sally, and I don't know whether she wants to say something.
Well, I'd say, hooray, we've got Sally. Let's see if she has any thoughts to share with us. Hey, young lady. Kathy's trying to come in, but she's not coming through. I'm not sure why.
I will share when I get home. I'm with my mom right now, and we're on our final stretch home. And when I get home, if there's still room for me to speak, I will.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Tell Mom we said hello and we send our love.
Oh, thank you. I sure will.
All right. Cool. And Kathy has just connected and joined us. So thoughts?
Well, Kathy just got here, so she didn't hear all that harangue.
So any other thoughts, young lady?
I need to do a wake-up sheet on having a goal for finding a word that you can use that conveys the meaning you intend, but without you having to explain it for a half an hour so that everybody else gets it.
Oh, there's no big explanation. It's real simple. I use words that reflect my awareness that this perception belongs to me. That's what I have. That's only 10, 15 words. That's a pretty easy explanation for something as gigantic as moving out of a whole lifetime and generations of projection communication into actually responsibility communication where I own it instead of make it about somebody else.
Okay, if you say what you just said, and that's okay with you to say all that you said, then I can drop my goal.
Well, and it might be a reflection too. It might be worth doing a worksheet on just the idea of actually personally being responsible for the constructs of your mind instead of
Oh, yeah.
pretending that this construct about, like I'm upset, I'm disturbed, I'm in pain, I'm in sadness about this. So maybe a worksheet that around that one and letting that free might open a different space.
Okay.
Cool. Sweet. Well, Miss Jeannie, any other thoughts on the topic for you, sweetie?
No. And I had pasted in the chat room the statement of regulatory speech or whatever that we were going to
From the other day.
discuss today. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's strange. It's not showing up for me, sweetie. It's not in the chat. Did you push the send button on it?
I did. I'll put it in again.
Hmm.
Is it
Oh,
in
there
there
it
now?
is. Yeah.
Okay.
Came in. Yeah, so yesterday when we completed, we had put forward one of the statements that Jeannie had come up with from her writing that was in the realm of perhaps worth looking at as an example of regulatory speech. So do you want to explain that one, hon?
Well, it was, I'm not sure which worksheet it was, but it was in doing the worksheets. And let me look real quick and see if I can find it. Because it might help being in context. Um, it was probably, I'm just guessing because it was like not allowing myself to remember without it resonating fear and hate about the event itself. Um, and well, let me do just a Google search here real quick on my submission. Okay.
And
So
we'll take a moment to breathe with
it's
that. Go for it.
in it was in the chapter of becoming aware, and I had just talked about uh, this is in step 6. In step 5, I had talked about being aware of who I really am and believe it to be true. And then, having reached step 5 above, I'm now ready to heal. I want to give myself permission to remember without fear and hate. I can take one small step at a time and count it as success without needing to complete the whole marathon at once. And then willingness will include accepting that I can change, that when I change what I once considered permanent in my life, relationships may also shift. And it goes on down. So it's um, around willingness to heal, and healing takes looking at what happened, looking at the event, remembering it, and being able to feel safe enough, I guess, to remember the events without fear, without hate.
Yeah. Yeah. The just taking this sentence itself in isolation, the way that, and my objective in us talking about regulatory speech is to make it clear how to make the whole idea of regulatory speech functional. So if I look at this, I want to give myself permission to remember. That stands totally and completely on its own. And then when you add without fear or hate, fear and hate has no function in remembering. But when I say that, my mind is telling me that in my remembrance, there's still, I'm informing myself through my unconscious speech that, oh, there's maybe still some fear and hate for me to work out around these things that
Yeah,
I'm working through and remembering. So
it's like, remembering it is triggering then the emotions that went with the event.
right.
And so wanting to be aware and heal enough to be able to remember the events.
Yeah. So if I were fully healed around this, is just using again to utilize regulatory speech to recognize that when I'm informing myself from the unconscious that there's something I still need to work on. If you were totally complete with that and finished with that whole thing, I want to give myself permission to remember, and whatever the event was, I stay connected to love and I breathe. If that were my automatic unconscious response, then I'm finished with that issue. But I've given myself a clue when in the context of remembering, I bring the words fear and hate in. My unconscious is informing me. Oh, there's still another little piece of work to do here. So that's part of how to make make use of the whole idea of regulatory speech. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Cool. All right, well, let's paste another one then. And the next one that you had put in the notes that you sent me was the one I just pasted. You are not finished healing, and you are not behind. So if you look at the first piece of that sentence, acknowledging, it's just the truth. Okay, I'm not finished healing. That's true. But then you are not behind indicates that around the healing process, there's probably an old issue, an old reality that needs to be cleared out about being behind, about not, keeping up with the crowd or, whatever. Whereas if there weren't a regulatory speech component to it, it would be you're not finished healing and you're right on track and you've got more work to do. How cool is that? Healing is not a destination to reach, but a way of meeting what arises. So again, there's a complete statement. Absolutely true. Healing is not a destination to reach, but a way of meeting what arises. But then the speech comes back in without fear or hostility and allowing love to do what it naturally does when given room to flow. So still, in that statement, it indicates, again, the language coming forward indicates, Okay, so there's still a little fear and hostility here. And then it's a clear step forward of allowing love to do what it naturally does. That's right on track. Yeah, healing. Yay. Does what it naturally does. Anyone with any thoughts about that one? Okay. Well, let's take another one from your list, sweetie. The next one you sent me is, just copy it here. So the next one that Janie sent me was, this does not mean it is my fault that others behaved in harmful ways in the past, but I acknowledge them, my part, in drawing them into my space. This is one that kind of sits on the fence. Is it regulatory speech? Well, I could look at it and see if it's got a message for me. And it might just be an acknowledgement of the way that it works. This is one that could be taken either way. So acknowledging that a situation that I'm in, others have behaved poorly in the past. When I take responsibility for my part, then this is a factual statement. Does not mean it's my fault. They're responsible for what they've done. I'm not responsible. And it could be that, if blame has been an issue in one's life, that could be an indicator, there's maybe another piece around it being my fault to be done here. But otherwise, everything is in the context of moving into healing and simply taking responsibility for, whatever, whoever, however I draw people into my space, that's my responsibility. It makes sense.
Yep.
Yep. Any other thoughts for you around the whole idea of regulatory speech and how it becomes usable?
I think it becomes easier to catch yourself after a while.
Definitely, unless there's total denial. And if there's total denial, then we'll gloss over. We'll be able to have a conversation as well. This happened, and I'm really upset about it. That's it. Don't make me responsible for what's going on inside of me. And ultimately, I think we each need to recognize that 100% responsibility is the only solution. And so that's where this work wants to go, with 100% responsibility. Yes, it's shown up in my space, and that's theirs. The fact that it's shown up in my space is mine. What am I going to do with it? Can I gently and sweetly stay connected to love and breathe while somebody delivers this situation to me, this blow or whatever? Can I stay connected? Then cool. And if something other than love comes up in me, then no. I'm going to let go of my conversation about them. I'm going to step back into actually taking responsibility. Owning what's going on. Anyone have any thoughts to share? I have this little guy, Lincoln, just laying here sweetly beside me. I am blessed. And if no one has a thought to add, let's just get into a quiet space together. And if you're in a place where you can close your eyes, not for you, Sally, driving, yes, I understood it. But if you're in a space where you can close your eyes, let's just close your eyes and take a couple of deep breaths and allow yourself to take a look around your environment, your physical environment, the space you're in. Is there anything about the space you're in that triggers anything less than love? If it does your automatic decision system kick into speech about how the environment is the cause of what's moving in you? And allow yourself to just breathe and recognize. My environment has never in a billion years caused anything to happen in me, but it sure can trigger it. And then allow yourself to take a couple of deep breaths again and take a look around in your mental environment. Is there anybody or anything that when it appears in my life, in my mind, that I have even the slightest inkling of a thought toward, oh, this is about them? If so, we're just going to invite everybody to take a few deep breaths. And as you breathe, allow that breath to deliver the presence of conscious, active love into every cell in your structure at the deepest of deep levels. Allowing that breath, so to speak, to go right down to the very depth of your genetic toes. And if it meets anything there that is unlike love, that contributes to perceptual constructs that you want to put outside of you when you're the one that's feeling them, and then allow the depth of the breath to deliver that presence of love right into that part of your physiology. And that part of your physiology might be a neuropeptide held in mind from a thought you've had in the past. It might be a little speck of genetics deep down in your structure. It might be a total lockup of the diaphragm, holding back, not wanting to feel. And once again, just allow your breath to gently move and soften whatever that is. Soften with the warmth of the light of your breath, of the presence of love being delivered by your breath, literally into your tissue structure. And letting the exhale just totally, just letting loose of it and letting it fall out of your structure. And with the next breath that you take in, notice any tensions, perhaps your neck, your back, your buttocks, maybe your feet. If there's a tension anywhere there. Allow your breath to gently fall into that tension, letting it soften, letting it open. And then imagine that you're hearing Yeshua's voice as he says, I am the light of the world. And you listen deeply and you recognize that he is extending that light to you. And perhaps places where you haven't been able to penetrate yet with your own light, you allow his light to penetrate, to move deeply. And as you take that next sweet breath, once again you hear his voice and he says to you, you are the light of the world. The exact same statement except for the pronoun. It goes from I to you are the light of the world, and you allow your breath to move to the next depth within your physiology. Allowing everything within your tissue structure to soften. And as everything softens, blood flow increases where perhaps there's been restriction previously. One of the main offenses that creates disease on a tissue level is the restriction of blood flow, the delivery of oxygen, nutrition, the removal of wastes by tightening. And allow yourself to just take 3 or 4 big, deep breaths, reaching to new depths of softening everything within your tissue structure. And as the breath moves into deeper and deeper places, so moves that all-encompassing and all-embracing love. The love moves in at depth and dissolves literally, energetically, any frequency that is less than love. And allow yourself to breathe and really receive that acknowledgement of you from Yeshua. You are the light of the world. And if there's a part of you that comes forward with something like holding with the breath, oh no, not me, that's the place to just once again soften and take another breath and let it drop into depth. Here's Yeshua looking you straight in the eye, acknowledging you for who you are. You are the light of the world. And you let that light flood down through every cell in your structure. Every bit of tissue opens to the full flow of that presence of love, accompanied by blood flow and the delivery of oxygen, nutrition, the moving through of waste products and out of the structure. And you just take a moment to bask in that breath, to bask in that presence of love. And you allow it to permeate every cell of your structure. You allow it to drop right into your jaw. And let your jaw soften and open. Your eyes soften, your face softens. This energy of sweet, pure love just flows through every cell, every bit of bone, sinew. It's just received. And then as you receive it, you're empowered to give it. And then on the next level, you let that flow through you and deliver it to all the world. Thus, by receiving, you become the deliverer of the active presence of love to every mind, heart, and being on the